We cannot change anything until we accept it. Condemnation does not. It oppresses. Marcus Aurelius. The northern frontier of the Roman Empire was a place of biting winds, endless forests, and restless tribes who refused to bow to Rome's authority. It was here, far from the marble streets of the capital, that Marcus Aurelius spent years of his reign. He did not lead from a distant palace. He lived among his soldiers, sharing their hardships, breathing the same freezing air, and enduring the same dangers. But while others had the strength of youth and health, Marcus carried his chronic ailments into battle. His body often betrayed him. Fevers left him shivering under layers of wool. Stomach pains robbed him of sleep, and the damp northern climate gnawed at his lungs. Yet each morning, he rose to face the day, wrapped in a heavy cloak, issuing orders with a calm voice that belied his physical weakness. He knew that the men around him drew strength from his presence. If the emperor faltered, morale would crack like ice underfoot. Between war councils and supply checks, Marcus would retreat briefly to his tent, not to rest but to write, capturing thoughts that steadied his spirit. You have power over your mind, not outside events, he would remind himself, as the sounds of hammers, shouts, and distant enemy drums filled the cold air. Illness might slow his body, but it would never break his will, and it was this quiet defiance that kept the empire's northern walls standing. The emperor's silent grief. In the grand halls of Rome, emperors were expected to be unshakable, symbols of divine authority untouched by the sorrows of ordinary men. Yet Marcus Aurelius carried wounds no title could shield him from. Over the course of his life, he fathered at least 13 children, but the cruel hand of fate allowed only a few to survive into adulthood. The loss of each child was a quiet devastation, endured in the shadow of public duty. There were no tears on the Senate floor, no moments of visible collapse. The empire could not afford an emperor in mourning, but in the privacy of his chambers, surrounded by the fading scents of flowers left from the funeral rites, Marcus faced the silence left behind. He refused to let grief curdle into bitterness. Instead, he turned to philosophy, reminding himself that death was not a tragedy, but a natural return to the source from which all life comes. Still, no philosophy could fully dull the ache of a father's heart. Each morning, he rose to meet the day, knowing that personal sorrow was now stitched into the fabric of his being. And perhaps it was this intimate knowledge of loss that made his reign so tempered with compassion, for he understood, more than most, that behind every Roman citizen was a life as fragile as his own. The eastern provinces had long been the theater of great men and sudden turns of fate. By the early 170 SAD, the name Gaius Avidius Cassius carried with it the hard geometry of triumph and the steady weight of a man who had proven himself on campaign after campaign. A Roman of distinguished rank and a seasoned general, Cassius had risen through service under Lucius Verus in the Parthian campaigns, and had earned a reputation for energy and competence. He was, by the mid-160s, one of the empire's foremost commanders in the East, a figure who moved easily among the legions, the cities, and the fractious governors of the eastern provinces. In 166, Marcus Aurelius had raised him to a position of major authority in Syria. Within a few years, he had been the supreme military presence of the Eastern theater, suppressing revolts and maintaining Rome's interests where the frontier met foreign kings and native unrest. His career was the sort that bred loyalty and local power, soldiers who trusted his command, civic elites who saw him as a guarantor of order, and provincial bureaucrats who found in him a man who could carry Rome's business through the region's tangled politics. At Rome and along the Danube, events were sharpening into crisis. The Antonine Plague had bled manpower and strained the empire's internal coherence. Military campaigns were harder to staff. Reinforcements moved more slowly, and rumor found fertile ground in the wake of sickness and exhaustion. Marcus Aurelius, who combined an emperor's responsibilities with the burdens of a commander's presence on the frontier, was campaigning in the north, and the long, cold winters and the constant demands of defending the Danubian line left the imperial court and provinces unusually brittle. Into this atmosphere of stress and rumor came a simple, devastating falsehood that the Emperor Marcus had died. The rumor, its origin obscure, its veracity non-existent, moved through the Levant like a wind. For men who held local power, and whose authority depended on the central government's reputation, the report was a temptation as well as a threat. Cassius heard the rumor in the very nerve center of his power. He had victories to his name, and a network of clientage and loyalty that made his position strong in Syria and significant in Egypt. Whether he acted out of calculated ambition, political necessity, fear of being eclipsed, or a sense that he was the only man who could hold the eastern provinces together, the result was the same. In the spring of 175 AD, Cassius accepted acclamations from his troops and declared himself emperor. The proclamation was swift and dramatic. Troops in several eastern garrisons raised the standards of a new rule, and the strategic governor of a region so vital to Rome's grain supply and eastern wealth now presented himself as a rival to the distant, possibly dead, ruler. The move instantly remade the political landscape of the eastern Mediterranean. Syria had turned from a bulwark of Rome to the seat of an insurgent claim.